stay here. I like it here, and so I think I have lost my appetite for the Broadway theater. I think possibly maybe a little ambition, because I believe that ambition belongs to youth.
Oh, Betty, what kind of play would interest you?
Well, anything good, of course. Any actor wants anything good, and I don't know whether I'm equipped for it or not. I hope to be better equipped for it in a couple of years, but of course that remains to be seen, and if I'm not better equipped for it, needless to say, I'll be out of everything.
I think you're equipped for anything, Betty.
Thank you.
Well, Betty, did you ever see Bogey on the Broadway stage?
No, I can't say that I did, Ed. That was, if you'll pardon me, before my time, or at least I was in very three-cornered pants at the time. But I did see him in many motion pictures, and I may say, and this is strictly between us, of course,
yes?
He was not a favorite of mine. It's only fair that I tell you that. I figured that he was one of those, you know, I believed everything that I saw in pictures. And when I first came out here under contract to Howard Hawks, Howard told me that he would like me to appear in my first picture opposite either Cary Grant or Humphrey Bogart. Well, of course, Cary Grant was heaven to me, and Bogart was horror. Because I was convinced that Bogart was strictly a Dies Demendos.
Bogey, you know, that ain't true, Ed.
It ain't. Ain't true no how, huh?
No, it ain't true.
Bogey, what is the worst thing that you can recall that a critic ever said about you?
Well, the worst thing that a critic ever said about me was said in the first play that I appeared in, a play called Swifty, I think it was, said by Alexander Wolcott. He said, "The young man who embodies the aforesaid sprig was what might mercifully be described as inadequate." And Alan Dale, whom you may remember, said that Mr. Bogart gave some rather trenchant examples of bad acting. A little later, Alexander Wolcott became a good friend of mine. He changed his mind, thought that there might be a chance for me. And a few years after that, I went to Chicago in the Cradle Snatchers, and a critic named Amy Leslie, a lady critic, wrote a review in which she said that, as I remember it, Mr. Bogart has the grace of a Valentino, the charm of an E.H. Southern, and the dramatic appeal and strength of a John Barrymore. So I sent this to Wolcott, and Wolcott printed it in his column with a comment underneath saying that this is no more than any male critic says about any ingenue who hasn't got a hair lip.
Well, Wolcott was a very good friend of mine, too, and he always would begin every comment to me by saying, "Now listen, repulsive." Betty, after all these years, what do you think of your husband now as an actor?
As an actor in motion pictures?
Yes.
Well, again, I say this is strictly between us, Ed. I wouldn't have him hear it except for the fact that he's here and I can't help it. I do really believe that he and Spence Tracy are probably the two best actors in pictures today. And as he waves this thing under my nose, if you'll glance on the mantelpiece, you will see a small gold statuette, which keeps reminding me about how wonderful he is.
Oh, that's the Oscar for the African Queen, isn't it?
That sure is.
With John Huston directing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bogey, are you going to make any more pictures with Huston?
Yes, we have a project in mind. Until you get up the money, it's always called a project. The Man Who Would Be King by Rudyard Kipling, which I think John wants to shoot in India, some inaccessible part of India, probably the most inaccessible part, because he likes to shoot where it's almost impossible to shoot. If he could get a camera on top of Mount Everest, he'd have one there, believe me.
Betty, every once in a while I see a reference to you as The Look. How did you earn that perceptive title?
Well, The Look, Ed, came along at the same time as The Legs and the Leer and the whatever, what have you. The Look, the From Down Under look, as Mr. Bogart named it, came in a very odd fashion. It came because I was so nervous when I started to work in pictures that I felt that the only way to steady myself was to give the look, which is this.
Miss Bacall, what do you consider the best picture you were ever in?
Well, the best picture I ever was in was, well, for sentimental reasons, To Have and Have Not, and for other reasons, I suppose, How to Marry a Millionaire. But the best still picture I ever was in, if you care to see it, I'll be happy to show it to you.
Yes. I can guess what it is.
Well, this is it, Ed. And I'm sure that you will recognize that it's Harry Truman on the right and little me on the left.
Yes.
And it came about, I was asked to appear at the National Press Club in Washington one afternoon, and the Vice President of the United States, Harry Truman, was going to be there at the same time. He was asked to play the piano, and suddenly a voice from the unknown, from the Never Never Land, came and said, would you please sit on the piano? I did sit on the piano, and this is the result. Now, it's a wonderful memento for me. I'm very happy about it. I don't know how Mr. Truman feels, but
I have another anecdote about Mr. Truman, who, as you remember, became president shortly after this picture. We had dinner with him, he and his wife, out here one night when he was on one of his campaign tours, and Miss McCall at that time was pregnant or with child, or childing, whatever you choose to call it. And I made him a bet that the child would be a girl, and he bet it would be a boy. And, of course, I lost because it was a boy, and so I sent him the $20 with the request that he return it autographed or signed on the back so that I could keep it as a memento, which he did.